see your name appear, I can't help but smile like the polished finger.
Alright, picking copyright free background music. It's really annoying when my freaking fan is that loud. Yeah, no, it's just the fan, okay. Just up the mic, or the audio input rather. Dragged. a mountainside. Oh goodness. Oh, we did want to build a mountain castle. Here we go. This one. First things first, definitely building a staircase up and down. And this is definitely a cliff, so... down to the village to tear my house apart. Note to self, Dragon loves these kind of villages. I'll play Desert Worlds more often then. We're just tearing down parts of my house. And now we're hiding indoors because it is night. Can you hear me, by the way?
A deadly pair would embark on a killing spree.
On the 23rd of June 2012, in the city of Elliott Lake in Ontario, Canada, a segment of the rooftop parking deck at the Algo Centre Mall collapsed, smashing down through 2 floors of the shopping centre. The incident, which claimed the lives of 2 people and injured 22 more, lasted just a few short moments, but was the result of a slow, quiet, corrosive process that had been going on for decades. The Algo Centre Mall was opened in August 1980. As the largest commercial complex in the area, the mall acted as a community centre and regularly hosted events such as car shows, fundraisers for charities, antique appraisals and local markets. The mall was a sizable 18,000 square metres, or 190,000 square feet, and on top of a plethora of stores and services, also contained the 80-room Algo Inn, the largest hotel and retirement residence in the area, a library, constituency offices, public health offices, and a grocery store. The building also happened to have rooftop parking. Despite how important the mall was to the community, the building was plagued with issues from the beginning. From the 1990s, leaks were a pretty regular occurrence. It was commonplace to see the floors of the mall littered with buckets, while the ceilings were covered in a patchwork of visible repairs. In 2008, the Bank of Nova Scotia branch in the mall had to close down for a week to repair the damage caused by multiple leaks. While obviously inconvenient, these leaks were only a prelude to the much greater disaster still to come. At approximately 2:20 p.m. on the 23rd of June 2012, a large section of the Algo Centre Mall's rooftop, which also doubled as its parking deck, collapsed, bringing thousands of pounds of concrete and metal crashing down onto the floors below. Shoppers and staff, caught entirely unawares, fled as best they could, evacuating even the unaffected areas of the mall, as the whole building was now, quite reasonably, believed to be structurally unstable. 22 people who escaped the mall did so with injuries requiring treatment. 2 further people inside the building at the time of the collapse, however, were not so lucky. 37-year-old Lucy Aylwin and 74-year-old Dolores Perazzolo were trapped in the rubble at the site of the collapse. Aylwin had been working at a lottery kiosk at the mall, and Perazzolo had been her customer. Now the two were trapped together under the dangerously unstable wreckage. A search and rescue team was on site within hours of the collapse, but faced an incredibly complicated task. The building was at risk of further structural failure, a situation only worsened by persistent rainfall that day. Despite these conditions, rescuers worked their way through the debris until they were close enough to the 2 trapped women to hear signs of life. Before they could effect a rescue, though, a damaged escalator began to fall, and they were forced to retreat. By the early hours of the 25th of June, the 2 women had been trapped for more than a day. Their family and friends had travelled to the site to keep a vigil, and rescuers rallied and brought in more equipment to try and save them. A robotic arm was delivered to the site, something which took another full day. and was used to safely clear the debris trapping the women. By this time, however, it was too late. Both had passed away. Although there were signs that Lucy Aylwin might have survived for quite some time, and might have been saved had the rescue operation been just a little bit swifter. An investigation revealed that the decision to make the roof of the mall into a parking area had played a huge role in the incident. Each day during the winter of many successive years, cars had been moving from the streets of Elliot Lake onto the roof of the mall, bringing with them salt and road grit. This salt had sunk into the structure of the building, corroding the metal supports which held the roof in place. To prevent this from happening, a waterproof membrane should have been installed to protect the supports from corrosion. No such membrane was actually legally required by the building codes of the late 1970s and early 1980s, and so nobody was overly concerned when plans to fit one fell through. Instead, a contractor simply patched up existing damage with sealant, a step which did nothing to fix the underlying problem of seeping saltwater corroding supports. Poorly maintained rooftop parking may not have been the only structural issue faced by the mall. Structural engineer John Cadleck, who was involved in the building of the Algo Center Mall, claimed the project was marred by shoddy workmanship from the beginning, with missing bolts, crooked columns, and rusted steel beams all being noted as problems faced during construction. Cadleck was also confused by what he called the unique decision to put the parking lot on the roof. Despite his reservations, however, Cadleck signed off on the project, stating that at the time he believed the deficiencies had been rectified. This was, ultimately, not the case. The aftermath of the Algo Center Mall collapse was extensive and multifaceted. Unsurprisingly, a class action lawsuit was filed against the mall's current and former owners and construction and engineering professionals involved in the building of the structure. A lawsuit which, as of May 2020, was still ongoing. An engineer named Robert G.H. Wood, who signed off on a report declaring the mall as structurally sound mere weeks before the collapse, was indicted on 2 counts of criminal negligence causing death and 1 count of criminal negligence causing bodily harm. Ultimately, the judge decided that there wasn't enough evidence to find Wood guilty, although he did say that Wood should accept moral responsibility for the incident, stating that his work was shoddy, sloppy, and even inadequate, even if it didn't reach the levels of being criminal. The rest of the mall was demolished following the partial roof collapse. The closure of the mall struck a huge blow to the local economy. The mall had been a central part of the Elliot Lake economy, employing hundreds of locals and housing numerous community services, such as public health offices and the library. Ongoing structural problems notwithstanding, for many in the Elliot Lake community, the mall had been their main social outlet, and its loss was keenly felt. Many people and businesses left Elliot Lake following the collapse. A new mall, named Pearson Plaza, was opened in 2016, representing for many a potential fresh start for the community. Nowadays, however, Elliot Lake is perhaps most well known as a popular retirement community. In addition to the local impact, the disaster drew attention to the government's plans to cut federal funding for emergency services, including the search and rescue team involved in the agonizingly slow rescue attempts. In 2012, their budget had already been cut by $1 million as compared to the previous year. Thankfully, the collapse of the Algo Center Mall helped to turn the tide on this trend. Following the report made by the Elliot Lake Inquiry, the Ontario government allotted an additional $2.5 million into emergency response measures. This provided funding for specialised rescue situations, such as building collapses and chemical attacks and contaminations. While these incidents are incredibly rare, they do still happen, and the equipment and resources that rescue personnel have on hand when they do can become not just a budget item, but life or death for innocent people. This video was made in collaboration with Brick Immorta. Brick is something
the bond between Before we start, I should probably say that this video is based off the Joint Accident Investigation Commission's report into the incident. There has been subsequent theories into the cause of the disaster, stemming from more recent discovery of a hole in the ship's starboard side of its hull, and more modern 3D scanning of the vessel's resting place. The theories have surmised that the cause could have been an explosion or even a collision with a submarine. Right, with that disclaimer out of the way, here's the video. Ships are truly impressive pieces of engineering, defiantly navigating the immeasurable power of the sea. When you are near one on land, the vast size of such machines gives the impression that such a large structure of steel would be unsinkable. But as history has proven, this is most certainly not the case. And the cruel, merciless sea can swallow such vessels and the hundreds of lives aboard. The sinking of the Estonia would be the third worst loss of life at sea on board an European ship during peacetime, only being beaten by the RMS Titanic and RMS Empress of Ireland. There is one major difference that sets the Estonia aside, however, and that is that she didn't collide with another ship or iceberg, but instead the power of the waves themselves caused a major failure of one of her components that allowed her to operate as a car ferry. On the 28th of September 1994, within an hour, over 15,000 tonnes and 852 lives would be lost beneath the waves of the Baltic Sea. Today I'm going to rate this disaster here 5 on my patented, essentially now arbitrary, plainly difficult disaster scale. Our story may end in 1994, but it began all the way back in 1979, and the need for a new vessel for the rapidly expanding ferry industry in the Baltic Sea. A contract was signed for a new ferry on the 11th of September 1979, and was set to be built by Meyer Werft in Papenburg, Germany. The ship, which had her keel laid in October 1979, was to be built to similar specifications of the Diana II, in order to speed up construction by using a similar design. Her story was turbulent from the start, after the original customer, a Norwegian shipping company led by Parley Augustin, pulled out of the contract. Luckily, Rederi AB Sally, one of the partners in the Viking Line consortium, was more than happy to take over the project. The new ship was to be called the Viking Sally. The name Estonia came along later on in her operating life. As part of the new owner specifications, the length of the ship was extended from 137 metres to 155 metres, and along with this came a new superstructure design. One such design feature from the Diana II that was retained was a hinged bow visor that opened upwards, enabling vehicle access to the car deck. Various parts of the ship were built by different contractors, however the vital bow visor was installed by Meyer. Von Tel AB was the supplier of the visor, parts used to lock and operate the machinery. The machinery was actually manufactured by another company, Grimereds Verkstads AB, and all details, communication and changes were made through Von Tel as the middleman. The Bureau Veritas rules gave no detailed guidance for calculations for the visor from vertical and longitudinal sea loads. And as such, Von Tel and Meyer used their own estimations, and it is unknown if the two companies compared notes. The visor, including attachment devices, was built of grade A mild carbon steel and was set up in a way that meant the visor couldn't be operated unless the ramp was fully closed. The visor pivoted around 2 hinges on the upper deck and was locked in place by 3 hydraulically operated devices, which were 2 side mounted and 1 bottom mounted, and it also had 2 manual locking devices. She had a passenger capacity of around 2,000 people, maximum service speed of 21 knots, maximum deadweight draft of 3,006 deadweight tons, and 4-man engines, creating a combined power of around 23,000 horsepower. The ship was built to the rules and regulations of the Finnish Maritime Administration. The Viking Sally was pressed into service between Turku and Mariehamn in Finland and Stockholm. Like most ships, the Sally had its share of screw-ups, including a couple of murders, propeller issues and a grounding. Her owners, Rederi AB Sally, were experiencing financial difficulties towards the end of the 80s and were sold to the Finnish-Swedish group F-John, but still operated under the Viking Line under her original name. She did fully come under the control of her new owners in 1990 when she was painted in Silja Line's colours, renamed the Silja Star, but remained on the same route. The new name would only last a year or so until she was transferred to the Wasa Line, another subsidiary of the F-John Group, and was placed in the Wasa Line operation in the Gulf of Bothnia. For the new operations, she was now called the Wasa King in 1991. That was until the 14th of January 1993, when she would change flags from Finland, which she was originally delivered, to the flag of Estonia. This coincided with a new owner, the Estline Marine Company Limited, and a new name, the MS Estonia. She was pressed into service on the Tallinn-Stockholm route. At the time, she was the largest ship in the Estonian National Fleet and became a symbol somewhat of the country's independence after the dissolution of the Eastern Bloc. Right, that leads us to 1994 and the Estonia departing from Tallinn on the 27th of September 1994 at 7:15 p.m. for a scheduled voyage to Stockholm, and her estimated time of arrival was 9 a.m. on the 28th of September. She carried 989 people, 803 of whom were passengers, leading to the remaining 186 being crew. Upon clearing the harbour, all 4 engines were powered up for full speed and she began her journey. Sea conditions along the Estonian coast were moderate, but became worse when she joined the open waters. The weather continued to worsen, with winds increasing to 15 to 20 metres a second, causing 2 to 4 metre high waves, which crashed across the Estonia's bow. As the ship got thrashed around, some passengers became seasick. At around 12 in the morning, and at a speed of about 14 knots, the vessel encountered the crashing on her port bow. At around 1 o'clock in the morning, a metallic bang from the bow area as the vessel hit a heavy wave was heard from the car deck by a member of the crew. The crew member informed the bridge of the strange noise. After inspecting the indicator lamps, all seemed well. The ship did not slow down after the reports, and the crew on deck didn't make use of a CCTV link to the car deck to investigate the area of the loud bang. Roughly about the same time, a shift changeover happened on the bridge, and soon after, another report of a loud metallic bang from the bow came in at around 1:05. The seaman of the watch was sent down again to inspect the visor, but just 10 minutes later, the visor separated from the bow and tilted over the stern. The ramp was pulled open, allowing water to surge into the car deck. The water caused a heavy starboard list, and at the same time dramatically slowing the ship down. Estonia's distress beacons had to be activated manually, which the crew failed to release. Throughout the ship, panic set in amongst the passengers, with many attempting to rush up the staircases, although many were still trapped inside their cabins. Life jackets were distributed to passengers who managed to reach the boat deck. Some jumped or were swept into the sea, and a few made it onto life rafts that had been launched. Due to the list of the ship, lifeboats can be deployed, and at around 1:20 in the morning, a faint PA announcement saying "Alarm, alarm, there is alarm on the ship" was broadcast. At 1:22, the first Mayday call from Estonia was sent, and a general alarm to crew for lifeboats was announced. By 1:24, multiple radio stations on both ship and land received the calls. Around the same time, the 4 engines stopped running, causing a backup generator to power up, but this left much of the ship unlit, further adding to the panic. Flooding of the accommodation happened at an alarming speed, and the starboard side of the ship was submerged at around 1:30. As the ship continued to flood, the list increased to 90 degrees. As she sank beneath the waves, the stern went first, disappearing from radar in the area at around 1:50. The location was about 22 nautical miles from Uto Island, Finland. Within the hour, 4 passenger ferries had arrived on the scene of the accident and started to search out and rescue survivors. It wouldn't be for over an hour before vital helicopter support would arrive. The mounting efforts rescued 138 people from the waters throughout the night and early morning of the 28th of September. After the living, the remaining search efforts found 94 bodies over the next few days. With such a tragic loss of life and the sinking of a thought to be reliable and safe vessel, investigators were faced with the question, how did the Estonia sink? Most of the victims went down with the ship to the seabed. She was found in international waters on the 30th of September within Finland's search and rescue region, resting on the seabed at a water depth of around 80 metres. It was vital that the cause of the sinking be found, as the Estonia was one of many similar ships operating in the region. With reports of noise from the bow visor hinting at a failure point, a remotely operated vehicle survey was decided on to ascertain the ship's general condition and whether the bow visor had become detached. During early October, the ROV made several videotapes of the wreck, and the results were shocking. During investigation into the sinking, it was found that the bow visor and ramp had been torn off, as it failed to resist the power of the waves hitting against it. The first metallic bang, heard around 1 o'clock in the morning, was thought to have been the sound of the visor's lower locking mechanism failing, and other reported noises were the visor flapping against the hull as the other locks failed. As a cruel twist of fate, the mounting bracket for the locking bolt position sensors appeared to be undamaged. This meant that even after failure, there was no warning to the bridge of the now open visor. This was even more compounded by the design of the bridge, which was too low to have a line of sight to the visor, meaning there was no way of seeing the state of the visor, even after the catastrophic failure. During the investigation, another incident a year before was highlighted, which would have been a vital warning sign. In 1993, the Diana II, Estonia's kind of sister ship, had experienced a visor locking failure as the starboard locking device lug was lost. The bottom lock was bent with its welds cracked, and the port side locking device lug was bent with its Today's video was suggested to me by Tim, one of my Patreons. I can't thank you enough for your support.
Throughout history, human beings have tried to span water's mighty currents and harness its great power. But sometimes, that power works against us. On June 17, 1958, Vancouver bridge builder Bill Stroud picks up some of his co-workers, as he does every morning. Before the day ends, everyone in Bill's car will be seriously injured or dead. June 17th, 1958, a bright, warm Tuesday in Vancouver, British Columbia. In Vancouver Harbor, a giant steel skeleton reaches out from the shores as high steel workers scurry along the girders of what will be the new Second Narrows Bridge. Lou Lassard is one of them. With 10 years of ironwork behind him, the 31-year-old is already a front-end foreman on the huge project.
I built bridge in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I built some in New Brunswick. I built some in Quebec. So when I heard about that great big bridge to be built in Vancouver, I thought that was a challenge. That was in my blood. That was the biggest bridge. I want to be part of it.
Lou has a lot of respect for the men who work under him, including young Bill Stroud.
He was an athlete, extremely solid athlete, tall, skinny, healthy, bright, intelligent. So that's why I hired him to work with me, because he got good footing, he's not scared of the air.
Bill is a front-end connector, responsible for joining the huge girders that make up the bridge framework.
When a big 60 or 70 ton girder comes up, you steer it in and you fit that all together, and as quickly as you can, you put lining up pins in to hold it temporary. Norm Atkinson and Colin Glendenny was the other connectors on the other side, and Joe Crush and I was connecting. He always had the same partner, and you knew what they were capable of, and you trusted them thoroughly.
Joe Crush is not only Bill's partner, but also a good friend. One of the men Bill
At 7 p.m. on the 17th of July, 1981, more than 1,000 people were gathered in the atrium of the Hyatt Regency Kansas City Hotel for a tea dance, when a structural failure occurred. 2 skywalks which crossed the lobby collapsed, crashing down onto the revelers below. The incident would cause the greatest loss of life from a structural collapse in American history, only ever to be superseded 20 years later by the destruction of New York City's World Trade Center. The Hyatt Regency Kansas City Hotel was part of the Crown Center complex, a suite of buildings owned by Hallmark Cards, consisting of both retail and residential space. The hotel stood 45 stories tall, with more than 700 rooms available for guests, as well as a grand ballroom and exhibition space. It was a popular venue, and the tea dances held there each weekend had
Hi YouTube, it's Joshua Miles and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be yet another solved case for my Curious Case series. Before we delve into this case, I'd just like to give a massive thank you to the people over at Surfshark for teaming up with me to bring you this episode. Even with the world currently on lockdown, it doesn't mean your location has to be. With Surfshark, you can never run out of content to watch. Surfshark is a VPN service that allows you to easily change your location, which gives you access to a variety of Netflix libraries from different countries across the world. The show or film you want to watch not available in your country, simply switch your location. And you can do that on every device you own, as Surfshark allows you to use one subscription on an unlimited amount of devices. You know just as well as I do that some of the things that we Google when researching cases can be considered a little bit strange. The beauty of Surfshark is that it hides your personal information and your searches from the government, so you don't have to worry about one day finding yourself on the FBI watch list because you were researching Ted Bundy. I also use Surfshark to access news sources that have restricted access to just their country, meaning it allows me to research deeper by pretending to be in the case's location. And just for you, Surfshark have given us a discount code to get 85% off your subscription, along with an additional extra 3 months for free. Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's absolutely no risk if you're unsure about whether or not you need a VPN. So be sure to click the link at the top of my description or the link in the pinned comments, grab a subscription to Surfshark and stay protected and safe online. And with all that being said, let's delve right into this case. Friday the 18th of September 2009, in the quiet town of Farmville, Virginia, was a Friday that would uncover a brutal and gruesome quadruple homicide that would shock everyone who lived there. Emma Keely Neiderbrock was born on Thursday the 15th of October 1992 in Champaign, Illinois, the United States, to parents Mark Allen Neiderbrock and Deborah Sue Keely. Emma's father, Mark, was actually a pastor at their local Presbyterian church, and her mother, Deborah, was a doctor. Pastor Mark had been the head of the local church for 6 years and had been born on the 20th of March 1959 in Illinois. He graduated from the University of Illinois with a major in photography before going on to work as a graphics designer. After considerable time working as a graphics designer, he decided to turn to the church and received a Master's of Divinity. During his time as a graphics designer, he married Dr. Deborah Sue Keely. Deborah had been born on the 28th of September 1955 in Richmond and had studied sociology and criminology at Longwood University, eventually becoming a professor of those subjects. After Mark and Deborah got married, they settled down in a nice family home in Farmville, Virginia, where they had their only child, Emma. Both her parents homeschooled Emma from the age of about 11 years old, and on all accounts, she had a fairly sheltered upbringing. Though, despite her sheltered upbringing, she always had a curiosity in the occult. Her research into the occult saw her stumble upon some very alternative genres of music, such as horrorcore. We'll take a look at what horrorcore is later on in this video, but it's a good indication of the alternative lifestyle that Emma was interested in. However, just because she had this interest in the alternative and the occult, it didn't mean she didn't enjoy popular music groups such as the Backstreet Boys or popular sports such as football or soccer for you Americans out there. At the age of 15, at the start of 2009, Emma's parents got divorced and separated. Dr. Deborah remained in the family home in Farmville, while Reverend Mark went to Heber Church in Pamplin. Emma's obsession with the genre of horrorcore began to intensify, and it actually began to disturb her mother to the point where her mother set up counselling sessions to ensure there was nothing untoward going on behind the scenes. Now, Emma wasn't alone in her obsession with the horrorcore genre. Her best friend, Melanie Wells, also loves that genre of music. Melanie was 2 years older than Emma, born on the 13th of February 1991 in Louisiana, before moving to West Virginia to study at the Musselman High School. It's unclear at what point exactly Emma and Melanie became friends, but what we do know is that their shared love for the alternative kicks their friendship off, and they were as close as can be. According to the official Wikipedia page, horrorcore is a subgenre of hip-hop music based on horror themes and often darkly transgressive lyrical content and imagery. Unlike most hardcore and gangster rap artists, horrorcore artists often push the violent content and imagery in their lyrics beyond the realm of realistic urban violence, to the point where the violent lyrics become gruesome, ghoulish, unsettling, and slasher film-esque. Those who create horrorcore music focus primarily on topics such as death, psychosis, psychological horror, mental illness, Satanism, self-harm, cannibalism, mutilation, necrophilia, suicide, murder, torture, rape, drug abuse, and often supernatural or occult themes. The genre has actually been linked to 2 school shootings, Columbine and Red Lake High School. It's quite a controversial genre, with some law enforcement officers believing that the horrorcore genre incites crime. Both Emma and her best friend Melanie had decided when Emma was about 14 or 15 to go to a horrorcore festival near San Diego, though Emma's mother was quite concerned for her safety if she were to attend at such a young age, so decided that they would all go together. The festival itself was fairly intense, but thankfully Emma, Melanie, and Emma's mother stayed safe, and Emma and Melanie had a great time and experience. At this festival, Emma actually became friends with somebody who works at the record label who had her favourite artist on their roster. They linked up via the social media site MySpace and quickly became really close friends to one another. Emma and Melanie were actually asked to become members of the artist's online promotions team, and they happily accepted. Also on this promotional team was a man called Richard McCroskey, who was a web developer with a passion for filming concerts and taking photographs for the artists. At some point, when Emma was just turning 15, Richard and Emma began to chat constantly online, and it wasn't long until they began e-dating. They would flood each other's MySpace profiles with messages of love and admiration for one another, despite never having met in person. As the months passed by, they constantly discussed the day when they would finally meet each other for the first time. And it wasn't long before the Horrorcore Festival in Detroit, Michigan appeared on their radar, and they decided that it was there that they would meet for the first time. But they wouldn't actually meet at the festival itself for the first time. They decided that Richard would come to Farmville and stay with Emma's family before leaving with Melanie to the festival. Melanie also came to Emma's house to stay during that time so that travel arrangements would be easier. On Sunday, the 6th of September 2009, Richard arrived in Farmville and went straight to Emma's house to meet her. They immediately embraced one another and spent every second together. The festival itself wasn't due to begin for another 6 days, so they spent the time together getting to know one another and doing all those things that teenagers do at that age. When the concert came around on Saturday the 12th of September 2009, Emma, Richard, Melanie, and both of Emma's parents travelled to Michigan to attend the event. And the event itself seemingly went off without a hitch, with all three teenagers enjoying the festival atmosphere. At least, that's what Emma's parents believed. Emma and Richard actually had an argument during the festival. What exactly they argued about, I'm unable to determine, but nonetheless, the group travelled back to Farmville the following day on the Sunday. Emma's father then returned to his own home, leaving Emma, Melanie, Richard, and Dr. Deborah, Emma's mother, in the Farmville family home. Melanie posted on her MySpace blog to say that she was intending on returning to her hometown in West Virginia on the 16th, which was the following Wednesday. But when the 16th came around, Melanie didn't return to West Virginia. She fell radio silent. Her mother, unable to get a hold of her, decided to phone Emma's father, Mark, on Thursday the 17th of September at around 5 p.m. on his cell phone to see if he could drop by and check on Melanie to see if she's okay. She told Mark that Melanie hadn't been answering her cell phone, and whenever she phoned the landline, Richard would pick up and kept making excuses as to why Melanie couldn't come to the phone. And so, Mark got in his car and drove to the Farmville home to check on the girls, arriving late in the evening on that Thursday, the 17th of September. Melanie's mother waited patiently by the phone for Mark to phone her and tell her about the well-being of her daughter. And as the minutes turned into hours, she began to grow more and more concerned. She tried contacting Mark, but was unable to get through to him. And by midnight, her concern had grown to sheer panic. It was at midnight that she decided to phone for the police and ask them to go to the house for a welfare check. In the early hours of that Friday morning, police officers pulled into the driveway of the family home and knocked on the door. Stood on the other side was 20-year-old Richard McCroskey, and when the police officers asked him about the whereabouts of the girls, he told them that they had gone to the cinemas. Satisfied with this response, as the girls wouldn't have been able to answer the phone if they were at the cinema, the police officers left the property and reported what had been said back to Melanie's mother. Interestingly, about an hour after the police had initially come to the Farmville home, they received a second phone call at 12:58 a.m., but this time it was from Richard McCroskey. He asked them whether they could come and check out the basement, as he had kept on hearing noises coming from down there and he was scared it was a home invasion or a home intruder or something untoward. So the police got back in their car and drove to the house. Richard answered the front door and escorted them to the basement, where they began to conduct a quick search to ensure there was nothing there, though they found nothing and ultimately they left the property. By the time late Friday morning came around, Melanie's mother had still not heard from her daughter or from Mark, and sick to the stomach with worry, she decided to phone the police to conduct another welfare check. As with the last time, the police pulled up at the driveway and walked up to the front door. Though this time, when they knocked on the front door, nobody answered. The police entered the house through the front door, although I'm unsure whether it was a forced entry or whether the front door had been left unlocked. What we do know is that the police officers, when they had come to the front door, had noted a very distinct, repulsive smell, which was similar to the smell of a decaying body. In the downstairs bedroom, the authorities discovered 3 brutally murdered bodies. A 4th body was also found in a room in the upstairs of the house. It was immediately clear that the occupants of the home had been attacked and killed. It was also immediately clear that one person known to be staying at that residence wasn't there. 20-year-old Richard McCroskey. In fact, a car that had previously been noted to be parked on the driveway of the house by police officers that had visited the property in the 24 hours prior also wasn't there. But who exactly was Richard McCroskey? Richard Samuel Alden McCroskey III was born on the 23rd of December 1988 in Castro Valley, California. His early childhood was mostly uneventful, though about 5 months before the events of this case, his parents separated and he remains living with his father. He wasn't particularly successful at school and had no plans of going on to university or really embarking on a conventional career path. His love for the genre of horrorcore developed around the age of 11, and he soon began producing his own music in the genre under the name of Psycho Sam. Some of his releases include titles such as Murderous Rage, Jesus Told Me to Do It, Burning Churches, My Dark Side, and The Voices. I'll spare you from having to listen to his music in this video, though if you for some reason are interested in listening to his songs, then they can easily be found on YouTube. The lyrics in his songs, and in particularly in the song Murderous Rage, are extremely eerie and horrifying, considering his later actions. Richard was considered to be a loner by his peers at school and by his family. He never really had any friends and spent most of his time alone in his room listening to horrorcore. His father is of particular interest as he had been a rock guitarist who had raised both Richard and his sister through a heavy dose of metal bands such as Insane Clown Posse, Metallica, and Primus. How exactly his music taste morphed from these classic rock bands to horrorcore is unknown. Richard, as previously mentioned, spent the majority of his time in his bedroom composing and producing music on his computer. He also began to design web pages, which he became pretty good at. Richard also frequently posted on his MySpace page to promote his music. On Thursday, the 17th of September, as Melanie's mother was desperately trying to get a hold of Melanie, Richard placed a phone call to his father's home. Now, nobody was actually there at the home, nobody picked up the phone, but he did leave them a message where he said that he hoped everyone was okay. He ended the message by saying, "I love you guys," which, according to his sister, was extremely out of character. The McCroskey family had never been a lovey-dovey kind of family, and so Richard expressing his love for his family was of immediate concern to his sister when she heard the message. She knew that something was wrong. On the day the police discovered the quadruple homicide between the hours of 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. that evening, a friend of Richard's phoned the police to let them know about a phone call that they had had with Richard the day before. Richard called his friend in the afternoon of the Thursday and had told them that he had killed one or more people, and he was clearly upset at his own actions. As a result of this phone call, and due to the facts that Richard had gone missing, presumably stealing the car that had been parked on the driveway that had belonged to Emma's father, Mark, Richard was identified as the prime suspect in this case. In the early hours of Saturday the 19th of September, the authorities sent over photographs of Richard to the nearest airport to ensure that if he tried to flee the state, he would be found and apprehended. Just a handful of hours after the police had sent out the photographs of Richard, at around 4:30 a.m., a police officer actually ticketed a young man who had been driving without a license after he had driven his car into a ditch. A tow driver was called who assisted in pulling the car from the ditch and who also dropped Richard off at a nearby convenience store. Unbeknownst to the police officer and the tow driver, this young man was 20-year-old Richard McCroskey, fleeing from the scene of the crimes. The tow driver would later tell the courts that Richard had a very strong odour about him, and it seemed as if he hadn't showered in a while. Richard had told this tow driver that the car he had crashed into the ditch actually belongs to his girlfriend's father, and the tow driver jokes that his girlfriend was going to kill him when she found out. The police officer that had ticketed Richard had seen no reason to arrest him, as he presented nothing that could have been deemed suspicious. The tow driver would also later tell the court that Richard appeared to have bruising around his neck. After he had dropped Richard off at the convenience store, everyone went on their way as it was the early hours of the morning and people wanted to go home. The next sighting of Richard was at a restaurant in Farmville at around 6 a.m. that Saturday morning. He had ordered some breakfast and was sat alone, appearing to be somewhat despondent. It was during this breakfast that he developed a plan of escape. He would catch the next plane out of state. After finishing his breakfast, he called for a taxi and was picked up at around 8:20 a.m. to go to the nearby Richmond airport. On the journey, Richard spoke to the taxi driver about horrorcore music, the festival he had recently attended, and his girlfriend Emma. The taxi driver actually got pulled over by the police during this taxi journey for speeding, and as the police ticketed the taxi driver, Richard had stepped out the car and smoked a cigarette. The taxi driver would later tell the court that Richard seemed to be in good spirits and wasn't acting abnormally at all, besides a overwhelming horrible odor that he had about him. Now, some sources state that Richard made a call to the authorities or somebody else important to this case during this period and confessed to the murders, but I was unable to confirm whether that's true or not, or whether that's just media speculation or just a rumor. So I still thought it was important to note in this video that some sources did say that. Nonetheless, as he waited to board his plane at Richmond Airport at about 11:30 a.m. that morning, the police located Richard and arrested him. Richard had been sleeping at the terminal when the police found him, and he willingly gave himself up to the authorities when they arrested him. They conducted a quick search of his body to ensure he had no weapons before taking him into custody. He was transported to the Farmville police station to undergo questioning, though he refused to cooperate with the investigators initially. Due to the overwhelming evidence against Richard, the friend telling the police that he had confessed to the murders prior to him being named a suspect, to the fact that he had been seen at the crime scene and he had run away from it and stolen the car, he was indicted with 6 counts of capital murder. And this was actually due to the fact that the police had drawn links between Richard and 2 other homicide cases that had similarities to this case and that had both occurred within the 3 years prior. When the investigators asked Richard what his motives were for the murders, despite not cooperating with the police, he told them that Jesus told me to do it. During his questioning, his home back in California was searched and several items were seized and entered into evidence, including his personal computer, the house phones where he had left the voicemail, and other minor pieces of evidence such as notebooks. Eventually, Richard caved and confessed to everything in vivid detail. He told the authorities that he had murdered Melanie, Dr. Deborah, and Emma the day after they had gotten back from the festival on the 15th of September 2009 at about 3 o'clock in the morning. Before committing the violent murders, he had ingested marijuana and alcohol. He then took a hammer and a maul and first attacked Melanie, who had been sleeping soundly on a couch in the den of the house, which was downstairs. He then went upstairs and attacked Dr. Deborah, who, like Melanie, had been asleep in her office upstairs. After murdering Emma's mother, Dr. Deborah, Richard went into Emma's bedroom and attacked her also while she slept. Each of the bodies had been bludgeoned beyond recognition, with the authorities having to later use dental records to positively identify the remains. Richard then stayed in the home for about 3 days before Emma's father, Mark, came to the house on the request of Melanie's mother. Richard attacked Mark from behind using the same weapons he had used on Mark's family and Melanie. Mark was instantly rendered unconscious as the vicious attack continued, and as with his family and with Melanie, he was bludgeoned beyond recognition. At some point, Richard had decided to move the bodies from where he had murdered them to the downstairs bedroom, though he left Emma's body in her bedroom upstairs. Autopsies conducted on the remains concluded that Emma, Melanie, and Dr. Deborah had stayed asleep during the attacks, as they had no defensive wounds which could coincide with conscious self-defense. After he had murdered Mark, Richard had started recording himself on a digital camera that was in the house. On this video, he told the camera that he knew deep down that he had to pay for what he had done. He also made several indications that he would try to end his own life before having to deal with the consequences of his actions. Due to the severity of his crimes and under Virginia criminal law, Richard was facing the death penalty for the quadruple homicides, though in September of 2010, the prosecution offered him a plea deal. This plea deal would see him plead guilty to the 4 brutal murders in exchange for a life sentence. The plea deal was actually agreed upon and supported by the victim's family, who didn't wish for the case to go to trial and didn't wish to go through the horrific events that had happened to their loved ones. Subsequently, Richard pled guilty to 2 counts of capital murder and 2 counts of first-degree murder, and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The 2 other homicide charges brought against him were dropped. I believe that was due to a lack of evidence against him. Richard claims that he had conducted these brutal murders due to his relationship with Emma. He had developed a fantasy portrayal of his relationship with Emma over the year that they had been constantly in contact with one another online. And when he had met her in person and she didn't live up to his fantasy, he got angry. According to his attorney, Emma's family and best friend had only been murdered as they had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. As Richard was being taken from the courthouse following his sentencing, he smirked. It's clear to me that Richard showed no remorse for the horrifying and violent acts he had committed, and I, for one, am glad that he will remain behind bars until the day he dies. But what do you think of this case? Do you think that he should have received the death penalty, or do you think that life in prison without the possibility of parole was justice enough? Let me know down in the comments below. And that's everything that I have for you in today's case. This episode, as you can tell,